Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Horror Mine, where we explain your favorite mysteries, thrillers, and horror movies. My name is Vikshai, and this week, my friends, I'm going over the 2003 South Korean mystery thriller film, Memories of Murder. This is a true masterpiece of a film directed by one of my favorite directors of all time, Bong Joon-ho, who most recently gained more widespread acclaim and fame thanks to his latest masterpiece, Parasites, which I'll definitely be covering on the channel. Memories of Murder is based on the true events of South Korea's first ever serial murders and tells the story of the detectives trying to solve the seemingly unsolvable case. This is, in my opinion, the best mystery thriller film ever made, and I hope you all enjoy the video. This video was actually made and uploaded when I first started the channel, but was taken down due to a copyright strike because I was using clips from the movie. I've since re-edited the video and I haven't had any problems since, but that's why I mainly use still pictures as opposed to actual clips from the film. But without further ado, sit back and relax and join me as we explore the mysteries and memories of murder. The movie opens with one of the most somber yet beautiful openings I have ever seen in any film. The opening scene and the entire rest of the film is accompanied by an amazing soundtrack by Japanese composer Taro Iwashiro that truly adds to the beauty and despair felt throughout the whole movie. We meet our first character, Detective Park, brilliantly portrayed by South Korean actor Song Kang-ho. Our first victim is discovered by Detective Park underneath a ditch alongside a dirt road. It is the lifeless body of a young woman, bound and gagged, and cruelly left to rot. Detective Park swiftly begins to interview several persons of interest in relation to the Grisly murder. Soon after, a second body is discovered in the middle of a field, bound and gagged in the same manner as the first. It soon becomes obvious that this case is becoming too much for this small-town police force. Detectives and forensic teams are literally tripping over themselves. The crime scene is never secured and a man carelessly driving a tractor runs over a footprint, destroying possible crucial evidence. I remember seeing this film for the first time at a young age and thought that the tractor driver purposely ran over the footprint to destroy the evidence. But I guess it's just another day in the life of that guy. Detective Park has a conversation with his chief of police where he states that he can tell a person's true character just by looking into their eyes. Detective Park gets a small break in the case when his girlfriend, Kwak Sol, reveals a rumor that a young man named Kwang Ho was seen following the latest murder victim the night of her death. Detective Park and his partner, Detective Jong, begin to question the man and even resort to bullying him in order to get a confession out of him. We then see a man following a woman down a road as he tries to get her attention. The woman attempts to run away but falls into a nearby ditch. It is then that Detective Park drives up and notices the incident. Detective Park proceeds to dropkick the man and punches him several times. But as it turns out, the man is just another detective from Seoul who has come down to help work on the case. We now see the three detectives in the woods still trying to get a confession out of Kwang Ho. Kwang Ho begins to describe the latest crime in detail, but never actually confesses to it. We now see that the police are ready to have Kwang Ho reenact the murder in front of the media, as they are certain he is the murderer. However, Detective Seo discovers that Kwang Ho has webbed fingers and could not have possibly committed the crimes. Complete chaos ensues at the scene of the reenactment, and Kwang Ho is released from custody. With no real suspect, the investigation returns to square one. Detective Seo figures out that all the victims were killed while it was raining and that they were all wearing red. He states that the body of a third victim is that of a local woman who went missing 2 months ago, but that her body has not been yet discovered. Detective Park does not believe Detective Seo's theory to hold any merit. However, thanks to Detective Seo, the police soon find the body of the third victim and determine that the killer will strike again the next time it rains. Detective Seo meets two schoolgirls that tell him about a rumor that the killer possibly lives underneath the outhouse located at their school. The police attempt to bait the murderer by dressing up female Detective Kwan in red clothing and having her walk the streets on a rainy night. However, we soon discovered that the killer already had his sights set on another victim. In an absolutely terrifying scene, we observe yet another young woman, unable to escape, fall victim to the killer. The body of the fourth victim is discovered next to a factory with no evidence other than a smudged footprint. In a hilarious scene, Detective Park concludes that the killer must be bald and not have any pubic hair, since no hair is ever found at any of the crime scenes. He proceeds to stake out at a local sauna and carefully observes all the naked men walking past him. Detective Kwon brings it to the team's attention that on the night of every murder, the killer requests the song Sad Letter to be played over the radio. The killer even specifically requests for the song to be played on a rainy day. Detective Park laughs off the idea that this may have any connection to the killings. Detective Seo attempts to track down the postcard sent to the radio station requesting the song, but the radio station has already thrown it away. We now see Detective Park resort to consulting a shaman to obtain clues about the killer's identity. He obtains a scroll from the shaman and along with Detective Young, performs a ritual over the latest crime scene in the middle of the night. Suddenly, another man can be seen approaching the scene. The two detectives quickly hide and observe whom they believe may be the killer returning to the scene of the crime. It is revealed to be Detective Seo, there to conduct an investigation of his own. Then, another man is seen approaching the scene. Detective Seo quickly hides behind a pile of dirt opposite that of the other two detectives. We then see the unknown man stand over the spot where the body was discovered. He pulls out a bra and ladies' underwear from his pants and lays them on the ground. He then pulls down his pants, revealing that he was wearing red panties, and proceeds to masturbate all over the crime scene, all within view of the three detectives. The three detectives begin to pursue the male suspect on foot through the city streets. The suspect then conveniently runs into a yard filled with hundreds of male workers, all wearing black clothing just like him. Detective Park is able to pick out the suspect from the crowd as he bends down while pretending to work and reveals that he is wearing red panties. They hold the man named Byung-soon over a period of several days, hoping to get a confession out of him. Byung-soon appears to be mentally disturbed, but it is clear that Detectives Park and Young are attempting to coerce a confession out of him. Detective Seo attempts to follow a different lead. He goes to the school to meet with the two schoolgirls he met the other day. He asks one of the girls to elaborate on the story they told him that rainy night. He then decides to investigate the outhouse for himself. He meets a nurse that tells him that she has seen a woman crying on top of the hill that overlooks the school several times. He discovers a scared, lone woman who lives in a house on top of the hill. It is revealed that the woman is actually a survivor of an attack from the serial killer. She recounts her brutal attack to Detective Kwon as we are shown glimpses of the attack. She reveals that while she never saw the killer's face, she could tell that he had very soft hands, similar to those of a woman. Detective Seo rushes over to check on Byung-soon's hands and determines that he is not the killer. This enrages Detective Park as he believes he was on the verge of a confession. The two detectives engage in a physical brawl in the police station in front of their chief, who attempts to break it up. It is at this point that all of the officers hear the song Sad Letter playing live over the radio and observe that rain is falling outside. The police chief attempts to call for a state of emergency and requests the outside help of other officers as he believes there will be another murder tonight. The next day, the body of a fifth victim is tragically discovered. During an autopsy, a sick detail is revealed that the killer filled the victim's vagina with 9 pieces of a peach. The detectives then receive a call from Detective Kwon at the radio station, and she gives them the name and address of the man who requested the song Sad Letter to be played over the radio. The man is revealed to be Park Hyun-gyu, a young factory worker who moved into the village shortly before the first murder. The police question Park Hyun-gyu, who denies every single allegation. The interrogation ends when an overly emotional Detective Young dropkicks the current suspect. At a complete loss and with no evidence, Detective Seo asks Park if he rehearsed the previous confession he obtained from Kwang Ho. Detective Park states that the confession was not rehearsed, and the two conclude that Kwang Ho was in fact a witness to the murder. They go look for Kwang Ho at his father's restaurant and residence, but he is nowhere to be found. They instead find a drunk Detective Young, who breaks into a fight with other customers of the bar. During the chaos, Kwang Ho appears and drives a wooden stick with a nail attached into the leg of Detective Young. Kwang Ho quickly runs away and climbs onto a nearby utility pole. The two detectives assure him that they are not there to do him any harm. They ask him about the night of the murder and ask him if he ever saw the killer's face. Kwang Ho reveals that he did in fact see the killer's face 3 times for each time the lightning struck. They show him a picture of Park Hyun-gyu and ask him if he was the man that Kwang Ho saw the night of the murder. Kwang Ho fails to positively identify the man and again runs off terrified. In an unfortunate turn of events, Kwang Ho is struck by an incoming train and killed, inconveniently getting rid of the only witness to this seemingly unsolvable crime. crime. I believe that the detectives made an irrational decision by attempting to find and question Kwang Ho all on their own. The emotional stress of solving the case made them rush into the decision that got the only witness to the crime killed. I believe they should have advised the chief of Kwang Ho possibly being a witness to the crime and properly bring him into the station for further questioning. The next day, we see that Park Hyun-gyu has been released from custody. The detectives are then advised by forensic scientists that a small amount of semen was discovered on the clothing of the last victim, but must first be sent to America to be tested. While pushing Detective Park's broken down car, the detectives determine that they must keep a close watch on Park Hyun-gyu until they receive the results that will ultimately prove his guilt. It is then we see the full extent of the damage done to Detective Young's leg. The nail that impaled his leg was rusty and has infected his lower leg, causing it to have to be amputated. Detective Park gets a visit from his girlfriend, Kwak Sol, and the two sit together by a lake where she asks him if he can quit being a detective and do something else, to which he does not reply. We see Detective Seo watching Park Hyun-gyu from his car, but he accidentally falls asleep. He wakes up to find Hyun-gyu getting onto a bus, but is unable to follow him due to his vehicle not starting. Kwak Sol is then seen buying medicine from a local pharmacy and walks home alone late at night. She crosses paths with one of the students Detective Seo spoke to earlier. Now, I'm no expert here, ladies and gents, but what the heck is with all these women walking the streets alone at night? They both know what's been going on as it's a relatively small town. One girl has been gossiping to everyone she sees about the murders, so she knows, and the other woman is the girlfriend of the primary detective on the case. Anyways, in an extremely horrifying scene, we see that both girls are being watched from the shadows by an unknown individual. The unknown assailant looks back and forth to both women who are walking in opposite ways, as if deciding which one is going to be his prey. The killer decides to grab the younger student and proceeds to bound and gag her. At the same time, an emergency defense drill takes place for the town, and all the citizens lock their doors and shut their lights, ensuring that no help will come to the girl's aid. The next day, the body of the student is discovered, bound, gagged, as well as mutilated. Detective Seo observed the girl's lifeless body and recognizes that she is the girl that he knew. We now reach one of the most intense movie climaxes that I have ever seen. Detective Seo, fully enraged, walks over to Park Hyun-gyu's residence and begins to beat on the man. He drags him outside onto the train tracks and takes out a revolver from his holster. As rain pours down furiously, Detective Seo points the revolver at his head and asks Hyun-gyu to confess to the murders. Hyun-gyu tells Detective Seo what he wants to hear, but then grabs a rock and swings the revolver out of his hand. Detective Park suddenly appears and states that the DNA results came back from America. He hands the envelope to Detective Seo as he proceeds to detain Hyun-gyu. Detective Seo opens the envelope and reads the results. Horrified and in complete disbelief, Detective Seo sees that the results came back negative and that the DNA found on the victim's clothing was not a conclusive match to that of Park Hyun-gyu. The scene that follows is, in my opinion, one of the most brilliant moments in cinema history. Detective Seo states that the document is a lie and that he does not need it to know that Hyun-gyu is the killer. He grabs his revolver off the ground while Detective Park grabs Hyun-gyu's face and forces him to stare into his eyes. After looking into his eyes and soul, Detective Park finally admits that he cannot determine whether or not Hyun-gyu is the killer. He asks Hyun-gyu whether he too gets up every morning. In that moment, seemingly asking him if he is a normal person that wakes up each and every day to live out his life. He tells Hyun-gyu to leave, and in that moment, a train appears out of nowhere, separating the detectives from Hyun-gyu on opposite sides of the track. We then see Hyun-gyu walking away into the dark tunnel as Detective Seo raises his gun and fires his revolver into the dark tunnel, striking Hyun-gyu. However, Hyun-gyu then gets up and continues to walk away as Detective Park states, "That's enough." Hyun-gyu walks away free, and we never actually find out whether or not he is the murderer we have been searching for. 10 years later, we see that Detective Park and Kwak Sol are now married with 2 kids. Detective Park is now juice extractor salesman Park. On his way to work, he decides to stop by the old road where the body of the first victim was discovered, the place which changed his life and the life of so many others forever. He looks inside the ditch while seemingly remembering the events of the unsolved case. He is interrupted by a young girl who asks him what he is doing looking inside the hole. She tells him that not long ago, another man came and looked into the hole just as he did. When she questioned the man why he looked into the hole, he reveals to her that he did something there a long time ago and came back to take a look. In this moment, we realize she unknowingly met the killer who came back to the scene of the crime. Park asks the girl if she saw his face and what he looked like. She reveals to Park that the man looked plain and ordinary. Park, speechless, looks straight into the camera as the film fades to black. While the film never actually reveals the killer's identity, I look at this ending in one of two ways. I initially thought that the girl was describing Park Hyun-gyu. I believe that Detective Park may have realized that, and his final look at the camera is that of despair and regret, knowing that he had the murderer in his grasp and let him go all those years ago. After rewatching the film and making this video, however, I honestly believe that the ending is left to interpretation and that the killer is not meant to be revealed. The little girl described the man as plain and ordinary. She gave no defining feature or unique detail about the man, implying that he could be just any ordinary man who is now living out his life just like the rest of us. The final shot of Park looking at the audience is also meant as a reminder to the audience that the serial killer to the real-life murders is still out there, possibly among us. And ladies and gentlemen, that was Memories of Murder, a true masterpiece of modern cinema and one of my favorite movies of all time. The movie was brilliantly crafted into one of the best murder mystery movies ever made by everyone involved. The direction, acting, music, and cinematography all came together for a truly one-of-a-kind final product that I recommend everyone to watch. At the time of release of the film, the murders were still unsolved, and the killer's identity remained a mystery. However, if you were wondering, the killer's identity was positively identified in 2019 thanks to several DNA tests. The killer was already serving a life prison term for the rape murder of his sister-in-law. The killer finally confessed to all the grisly killings, bringing closure to a 33-year-old case. Ladies and gentlemen, I really hope y'all enjoyed this video, and I can't wait to see y'all right back here in the Horror Mine. Y'all stick around.